Before we begin, a quick and important disclaimer. The following historical analysis examines the cultural, social, and legal evolution of divorce and family dynamics in 1980s America, along with its representation in broadcast media. This content is developed strictly for educational and entertainment purposes and does not constitute professional legal, financial, or psychological counsel. Family law is highly complex, jurisdiction-dependent, and subject to continuous legal revisions. Viewers dealing with contemporary relationship, marital, or legal disputes should conduct their own thorough due diligence and consult with a qualified, licensed attorney or professional advisor before making any legal or financial decisions. In July of 1981, more than 750 million people worldwide, including tens of millions of American citizens, sat transfixed before their television sets to witness what was marketed as the ultimate fairy tale wedding. The marriage of Prince Charles and Lady Diana Spencer epitomized an idealized, grand narrative of permanent romantic fulfillment. Yet beneath this glossy veneer of cultural aspiration, a far more realistic, chaotic, and revolutionary broadcasting phenomenon was quietly taking over the American daytime television landscape. While primetime networks offered affluent, unbroken family dynasties and hit fictional dramas like Dallas, Dynasty, and Falcon Crest, daytime television was shifting its cameras toward an entirely different, unscripted domestic reality: the systematic, highly public disintegration of the traditional American marriage. Throughout the 1980s, demographic data and historical trends revealed a stark truth about the state of contemporary relationships. The United States was experiencing an unprecedented surge in marital dissolutions, with statistical projections indicating that nearly 50% of all marriages formalized during this era would ultimately end in divorce. However, the true cultural shockwave of the decade was not merely found in the escalating statistics. The real transformation lay in where these deeply private, emotionally fraught tragedies were being staged. The 1980s marked the exact historical pivot point where the intimate trauma of family breakdown was extracted from the confidential, closed-door environments of local family courts and thrust directly into the living rooms of millions of ordinary citizens. For the first time in media history, television networks realized that the raw, unvarnished details of marital failure could be transformed into highly profitable, nationally syndicated entertainment. Day after day, daytime talk shows invited embattled couples, alienated parents, and warring spouses to air their most sensitive grievances, custody disputes, and financial betrayals before live studio audiences and millions of viewers at home. This sudden democratization of marital strife stripped away decades of social stigma, replacing it with an intense public fascination. It created an open loop in the American consciousness, forcing viewers to confront a pressing question. Why were everyday citizens suddenly willing to sacrifice their privacy on national television, and how did this decade of televised trauma permanently alter the legal, psychological, and financial frameworks of modern American relationships today? To fully comprehend the depth of this cultural shift, one must examine the specific legal and social infrastructure that enabled television producers to commodify heartbreak. The decade of the 1980s inherited the profound legal aftermath of the no-fault divorce revolution, which had gained momentum throughout the 1970s. Prior to this legislative shift, obtaining a legal dissolution of marriage in most American states required the moving party to prove a specific matrimonial offense, such as adultery, extreme physical or mental cruelty, or willful desertion. This traditional adversarial framework meant that divorces were inherently difficult to obtain, often necessitating the employment of private investigators, the fabrication of legal fault, and an immense amount of public humiliation. When states began broadly adopting no-fault divorce statutes, allowing marriages to be dissolved based solely on the assertion of irreconcilable differences or an irretrievable breakdown, the legal barriers fell. The immediate consequence was a massive influx of filings that overwhelmed state judicial systems. Everyday Americans found themselves navigating an entirely new legal frontier, without established cultural roadmaps or public examples to guide them. Television executives, possessing a keen understanding of public anxiety, recognized that the daytime talk show could serve as a surrogate town hall for a society in transition. The pioneering format of programs like The Phil Donahue Show capitalized on this exact need. Donahue did not merely interview his guests. He weaponized the interactive nature of the medium. Pacing the studio aisles with a microphone in hand, he connected the weeping, conflicted couples on stage with a highly opinionated vocal studio audience. A typical episode from this era might feature a husband and wife in the midst of a bitter dispute, discussing the granular details of their separation, asset division, and parental responsibilities. Viewers at home were not simply consuming passive entertainment. They were receiving a comprehensive, step-by-step education in the evolving mechanics of family law. Through these broadcasts, the American public learned the practical definitions of equitable distribution, the changing parameters of spousal support, and the psychological theories behind joint custody arrangements. These televised case studies function simultaneously as cautionary tales and as validation for individuals trapped in unhappy unions, providing them with the exact terminology and legal concepts needed to contemplate their own exits. The operational mechanics behind these productions were a marvel of industrial media engineering. Production assistants and researchers would scour court dockets, classified advertisements, and local support groups to find real couples willing to participate. Guests were often flown to production centers like New York or Chicago, with the offer of hotel accommodations and a platform to state their case. For many participants, the television studio offered a sense of validation or a final, desperate attempt to force their partner to see their perspective under the pressure of national scrutiny. This environment created intense, high-stakes television. The introduction of tabloid talk shows later in the decade, such as Sally Jessy Raphael, accelerated the emotional intensity of these segments. Shows began incorporating early iterations of onstage relationship counseling, utilizing pop psychology frameworks that simplified complex systemic family issues into easily digestible sound bites. Audiences watched as therapists analyzed body language, communication breakdowns, and behavioral patterns in real time. This shifted the focus from purely legal matters to deeply psychological ones, establishing a cultural expectation that marital conflict was something to be publicly managed, analyzed, and categorized. The consequence was a profound shift in the collective American mindset. Divorce transitioned from a rare, hushed family catastrophe into an ordinary, highly visible life stage that required management, strategy, and public processing. As the 1980s progressed, the financial stakes of these televised journeys escalated dramatically, reflecting the macroeconomic realities of the era. This was the decade of significant middle-class economic strain, the widespread entry of married women into the professional workforce, and the cultural emergence of the dual-income household. Consequently, marital dissolution was no longer just an emotional crisis. It was a complex financial restructuring. Television programming adapted swiftly to these shifting dynamics. Houding specialized segments were dedicated to examining the economic vulnerability of displaced homemakers, the enforcement of child support collections through newly enacted federal legislation, such as the Child Support Enforcement Amendments of 1984, and the legal battles over non-tangible marital assets, including corporate pensions, professional licenses, and degrees earned during the marriage. Talk shows frequently hosted legal experts and financial planners, alongside disputing couples to break down the long-term financial consequences of a poorly negotiated settlement. This constant media exposure altered public expectations and behavior. The legal profession itself began to adapt to this media-saturated environment, as family law attorneys recognized the power of public relations and television appearances to shape public perception and attract clients. The media feedback loop was complete. High divorce rates generated compelling television content, and that very content demystified the legal process, making the utilization of the legal system more accessible and less intimidating to the average citizen. For the modern U.S. audience, understanding this televised historical journey solves a critical, ongoing problem regarding how we perceive relationships and media in the present day. We currently inhabit a digital landscape dominated by the relentless public sharing of personal lives, relationship status updates, and public breakups across various digital platforms. The societal impulse to broadcast our most intimate emotional trials to a crowd of strangers did not originate with the invention of the smartphone or the rise of social media algorithms. The foundational psychology, consumer appetite, and narrative structures for this behavior were meticulously engineered, refined, and normalized in the television studios of the 1980s. By analyzing these historical trends, contemporary viewers can clearly identify the origins of modern relationship anxiety and the media-driven expectations that continue to influence family life. This masterclass provides the essential tools to unpack the cultural programming we have inherited, allowing individuals to separate genuine relationship health from the sensationalized, adversarial models of partnership that were popularized decades ago. It offers an indispensable historical lens to evaluate the ongoing evolution of marital contracts, prenuptial agreements, and co-parenting strategies, ensuring that we understand the past in order to better navigate the complexities of modern domestic life. To understand how this televised transformation manifested on a daily basis, we must look at the specific media programming that redefined afternoon television scheduling in September of 1981. This was the exact month that television producers John Masterson, Ralph Edwards, and Stu Billett introduced a brand new subgenre of reality programming with the premiere of The People's Court, featuring retired Los Angeles County Superior Court Judge Joseph Wapner. Before this programming innovation, the inner workings of small claims courts were entirely opaque to the general public. Suddenly, millions of Americans were granted a front-row seat to actual, binding legal arbitrations, many of which involved former romantic partners, divorced spouses, and estranged family members fighting over unresolved domestic debts. The structural brilliance of this format was its rapid pacing and its unvarnished look at the financial detritus of broken relationships. Viewers were no longer watching actors deliver scripted lines in a courtroom drama. They were watching real people argue over the division of a shared television set, the unpaid balance of a joint credit card, or the cost of repairing an automobile that had been damaged during a late-night domestic dispute. The operational model of the program was highly sophisticated and serves as an excellent case study in media engineering. Producers did not simply film random court cases. They systematically searched small claims court filings across Southern California, looking for specific disputes that carried high emotional resonance and clear narrative arcs. Once a compelling case was identified, the producers would approach both litigants with a unique proposition. Instead of proceeding in a standard, backlogged state court, they could agree to have their dispute arbitrated by Judge Wapner on television. To incentivize participation, the show established a designated production fund from which all court judgments were paid. If the judge ruled that one party owed the other $500, the show paid that amount directly out of the production budget, and the losing party suffered no personal financial loss, while the winning party received their money immediately. This eliminated the financial risk of litigation, while preserving the authentic, high-stakes emotional conflict of the dispute. This specific brand of television acted as a massive educational accelerator for the American public. Through historical trends tracked during this era, we can observe a direct correlation between the rise of syndicated courtroom television and an increase in the public understanding of basic contract law, oral agreements, and the legal definition of separate versus marital property. Imagine an ordinary scenario unfolding in a typical American suburb in the year 1985. A woman named Susan, living in Columbus, Ohio, sits in her living room during her lunch break, watching Judge Wapner systematically dismantle a litigant's weak argument regarding a verbal agreement to pay back a loan after a marital separation. In this era, Susan might be contemplating her own separation but feels utterly paralyzed by a lack of financial knowledge and an overwhelming fear of the legal apparatus. By watching 22 minutes of televised arbitration, Susan learns that without documented evidence, canceled checks, receipts, or written agreements, proving financial claims in a court of law is an incredibly difficult task. This realization fundamentally changes how she approaches her own impending domestic transitions. She begins quietly gathering bank statements, organizing tax returns, copying deed documents, and documenting financial transactions with meticulous care. This exact scenario repeated itself in millions of households across the United States, transforming passive television viewers into legally literate, strategic actors within their own domestic lives. The show provided a step-by-step masterclass in evidence gathering, cross-examination, and emotional restraint under judicial scrutiny. The case studies emerging from this era highlight a profound shift in consumer psychology. The People's Court and the wave of imitation programs that followed it proved that the American public possessed an insatiable appetite for the minute, mundane details of other people's financial and emotional misery. Television executives quickly realized that the closer the broadcast could get to the raw nerve of domestic conflict, the higher the ratings would climb. This realization catalyzed an aggressive escalation in daytime programming strategies as the mid-1980s approached. The traditional talk show format underwent a radical evolutionary mutation, shifting away from polite celebrity interviews and lifestyle segments toward high-intensity, conflict-driven confrontation. In 1986, the syndicated launch of The Oprah Winfrey Show permanently altered the landscape of daytime media by introducing a level of raw emotional intimacy and vulnerability that had never been seen on broadcast television. Winfrey did not merely observe the phenomenon of divorce from a clinical distance. She deeply embedded herself and her audience within the emotional architecture of the failing American family. Episodes were meticulously crafted around specific, highly polarizing themes, such as spouses who left their partners for younger individuals, the devastating psychological impacts of custody battles on children, and the hidden financial betrayals that occurred within seemingly perfect suburban marriages. This programming shift relied heavily on a structured step-by-step psychological breakdown of the guests on stage. A typical production sequence would begin by introducing a couple trapped in an extreme state of marital gridlock. The host would then systematically peel back the layers of their conflict, utilizing live audience feedback and expert commentary from visiting psychologists and family therapists to analyze the breakdown in real time. During this era, pop psychology concepts such as codependency, emotional unavailability, and toxic behavioral patterns were entering the mainstream lexicon, largely driven by their frequent deployment on these daytime broadcasts. Viewers learned to recognize the warning signs of emotional detachment and the destructive communication cycles within their own relationships. This shifted the focus from purely legal matters to deeply psychological ones, establishing a cultural expectation that marital conflict was something to be publicly managed, analyzed, and categorized. By the time Geraldo Rivera entered the daytime syndication market in 1987 with his self-titled show, the boundaries of acceptable televised discourse were pushed even further. Tabloid television began to prioritize shock value and overt confrontation, frequently featuring explosive, shouting matches between ex-spouses, current partners, and alienated in-laws. While critics condemned this trend as the vulgarization of American culture, the ratings told a completely different story. The American public was utterly transfixed. The historical data from this period indicates that daytime talk shows regularly captured a dominant share of the available viewing audience, outperforming traditional daytime soap operas and network news broadcasts in key demographic segments. The deeper cultural implication of this phenomenon was the complete normalization of public confession. Before the 1980s, the details of a marital breakdown were viewed as a profound source of familial shame, to be hidden from neighbors, employers, and extended family members at all costs. The relentless daily broadcast of hundreds of diverse divorce stories stripped away this historical stigma. It created a new cultural consensus that marital failure was not an anomalous tragedy, but rather a common, shared American experience. This widespread normalization had potential outcomes that stretched far beyond the television screen. It altered how individuals communicated with their partners, how parents discussed separation with their children, and how society at large accommodated the reality of the single-parent household and the blended family matrix. As we look back from the vantage point of the year 2026, it becomes increasingly clear that the daytime television industry of the 1980s acted as a massive incubator for the contemporary attention economy. The step-by-step methods used by television producers to extract maximum emotional intensity from real-world domestic disputes laid the exact groundwork for the modern reality television empires and personal confession videos that dominate current digital platforms. The 1980s taught the American public that their personal trauma was a valuable commodity, capable of generating attention, validation, and social capital. Yet, as the decade neared its conclusion, the nature of televised divorce was about to undergo another massive structural transformation. The focus began to shift away from the everyday struggles of ordinary citizens like Susan in Ohio, as the media realized there was an even more lucrative, high-stakes narrative to exploit. The public appetite for domestic drama was expanding, and viewers were growing eager to see if the legal systems, psychological theories, and financial battlegrounds they had spent years watching on daytime television would hold up when applied to the most wealthy, powerful, and famous individuals in the nation. The stage was being set for a monumental collision between celebrity culture, unimaginable wealth, and the legal machinery of marital dissolution, a collision that would culminate in a public spectacle so massive it would forever redefine the intersection of privacy, money, and media law in the United States. This raises the critical question of what happens when the fairy tale marriages of the ultra-rich completely disintegrate under the unforgiving glare of the national media spotlight, a topic that completely changed the rules of engagement for relationships in the modern era, setting up a media circus that would shock the nation and change high society legal battles forever. This shift from the domestic tribulations of ordinary citizens to the high-stakes legal warfare of the rich and famous required an entirely new media infrastructure. That infrastructure arrived definitively on September 14, 1981, with the premiere of Entertainment Tonight, a first-of-its-kind syndicated program that applied the urgent, fast-paced techniques of hard news broadcasting to the world of celebrity journalism. Before this development, The marital failures of Hollywood elites were covered primarily by print gossip columnists or weekly tabloids. Entertainment Tonight revolutionized the landscape by using state-of-the-art satellite technology to deliver daily, high-definition video updates on the legal filings, courtroom appearances, and settlement negotiations of public figures. The show transformed the tedious mechanics of family law into a spectator sport, complete with anchor analysis, investigative reporting, and graphic breakdowns of net worth. This media evolution occurred simultaneously with a massive structural shift in American family law. In 1980, the state of New York enacted the Equitable Distribution Law, a landmark piece of legislation that fundamentally altered how marital assets were divided upon dissolution. Prior to this, property was generally awarded to the spouse who held the formal title, which historically disadvantaged dependent spouses. Under the new equitable distribution framework, courts were mandated to view marriage as an economic partnership, requiring a fair and equitable division of all property acquired during the union, regardless of whose name was on the deed or stock certificate. Because New York and California were the dual epicenters of American wealth, media, and celebrity, these new legal standards immediately collided with the multi-million-dollar fortunes of high-profile entertainment figures. Television audiences were suddenly treated to a step-by-step education in how courts valued complex, non-tangible assets. Viewers watched nightly news segments detailing how forensic accountants calculated the value of a celebrity's future earning capacity, intellectual property rights, residuals from television syndication, and the commercial worth of a personal brand. A definitive case study of this phenomenon occurred in 1987 with the highly publicized divorce of actress Joan Collins and her fourth husband, Peter Home. Collins was the breakout star of the hit primetime soap opera Dynasty, earning an estimated $120,000 per episode at the peak of her fame. When the marriage collapsed after just 13 months, Home bypassed the standard, quiet settlement process and launched an aggressive, highly visible campaign for spousal support, challenging the validity of the couple's prenuptial agreement. The resulting legal battle became a nationwide television sensation. Because cameras were restricted in many traditional courtrooms, television news magazines adapted by using detailed courtroom sketches, daily press conferences on the courthouse steps, and exclusive interviews with the litigants' attorneys. Home capitalized on the media presence, frequently performing for the cameras and even singing to reporters outside the venue, while Collins used the opportunity to project an image of defiance and independence. When the court ultimately upheld the prenuptial agreement, awarding Home only a fraction of his multi-million-dollar demand, the outcome was broadcast as a major news flash. This case study served as a massive cultural inflection point, demonstrating to the public that prenuptial agreements were no longer just esoteric legal documents for old-money aristocrats. They were vital, enforceable defensive tools necessary for protecting personal autonomy and financial assets in a volatile economic climate. Imagine if a contemporary data analyst named Robert in the current year 2026 were to review the archival television footage of the Collins Home trial. Robert would immediately recognize that the public relations strategies utilized by modern celebrities during high-profile breakups were entirely pioneered during this exact mid-1980s window. The step-by-step weaponization of the media followed a precise operational blueprint. First, a legal team would intentionally leak specific, damaging financial or personal allegations to sympathetic entertainment reporters just hours before a scheduled court hearing, ensuring the narrative was established on the evening broadcast before the opposing counsel could formulate a formal legal response. Second, the litigants would use public spaces, such as charity galas or television talk show appearances, to subtly signal their emotional state to the public, transforming a private legal dispute into a broader cultural referendum on gender roles, fairness, and marital fidelity. This calculated interplay between high-finance legal strategy and public relations reached an entirely new level of intensity, as the late 1980s economic boom generated unprecedented levels of corporate wealth. The era of the corporate raider, junk bond billionaires, and massive real estate empires created a new class of ultra-wealthy individuals whose domestic dissolutions carried massive implications for Wall Street and corporate governance. Marital splits were no longer just personal tragedies. They were material events that could disrupt stock prices, force the liquidation of major corporations, and alter the control of vast business empires. Television programs like Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, which debuted in 1984, had spent years conditioning the American public to obsess over the opulent consumer habits of the billionaire class. When those same billionaires entered the divorce courts, the media naturally applied the same hyper-detailed, voyeuristic coverage to the destruction of their empires. The historical trends of this era show that the public was no longer satisfied with simple summaries of a divorce decree. They demanded to know the exact step-by-step mechanics of the asset division. How would a corporate titan liquidate $50 million in real estate without triggering a massive tax liability? How would a media mogul retain voting control of a television network if his ex-spouse was awarded half of the marital stock portfolio? Legal commentators and prominent family law attorneys became regular fixtures on nightly news programs, breaking down these complex financial equations into language the average middle-class viewer could comprehend. This constant exposure to high-stakes litigation permanently altered the aspirations and anxieties of the American public. The average viewer learned that a marriage contract was, at its core, a highly complex financial agreement with profound long-term consequences. As the decade of the 1980s drew to a close, the distinction between celebrity entertainment, corporate high finance, and tabloid media completely dissolved. The American public had been fully conditioned by a decade of courtroom television, high-intensity talk shows, and daily infotainment broadcasts to view marital dissolution as the ultimate form of narrative entertainment. The legal strategies had become more sophisticated, the public relations machines had become more aggressive, and the financial stakes had escalated into the hundreds of millions of dollars. The stage was now completely set for a singular, monumental domestic dispute that would unite all of these disparate media and legal elements into one explosive, multi-week national obsession. This impending public spectacle would involve a prominent, media-savvy New York real estate developer and his charismatic Czechoslovakian-born wife, whose separation would trigger a front-page tabloid and television war so ferocious it would fundamentally redefine the boundaries of privacy, corporate branding, and media manipulation in American history, leaving the public to wonder just how far a couple would go to destroy each other on the world stage. That monumental collision of wealth, celebrity, and media manipulation manifested in the final months of the decade, centering on the public dissolution of the marriage between New York real estate mogul Donald Trump and his wife, Ivana Trump. This case study stands as the absolute zenith of the 1980s televised divorce journey, illustrating how personal domestic warfare could be fully integrated into a global corporate branding strategy. Throughout the 1980s, the couple had systematically built an empire based on the public projection of symbiotic success, luxury, and marital solidarity. They were the premier living symbols of the decade's economic expansion, with their names attached to massive real estate developments, Atlantic City casinos, commercial airlines, and megayachts. When the internal architecture of that marriage fractured, it did not merely signify the end of a private relationship. It threatened the stability of a multi-billion-dollar corporate brand that relied heavily on the public perception of the couple's combined Midas touch. To understand the legal complexity of this specific breakdown, one must analyze the step-by-step evolution of the marital contracts signed by the parties throughout the decade. As the real estate market surged and asset valuations skyrocketed, the legal teams representing the husband insisted on a series of successive updates to their original 1977 prenuptial agreement. Separate agreements and modifications were executed in 1979, 1985, and finally in 1987. Each revision was specifically designed to adapt to the changing statutory landscape of New York family law, following the implementation of the 1980 Equitable Distribution Law. The legal strategy aimed to strictly limit the wife's potential claims to a percentage of the rapidly expanding corporate holdings, replacing vague notions of equitable division with predefined, capped cash payouts, real estate deeds, and specific child support allocations. When the separation became imminent in late 1989, the core legal battle centered on the validity and enforceability of these successive agreements. The wife's legal counsel launched an aggressive challenge, arguing that the contracts were executed under duress, lacked full financial disclosure, and failed to reflect her immense, direct contributions to the growth of the corporate brand, particularly her executive management of major assets like the Plaza Hotel and the Trump Castle Casino. The resulting media explosion transformed the New York tabloid press and syndicated television news into a battleground for public sympathy, which both sides recognized as a critical lever for legal negotiation. 4 weeks on end in early 1990, the front pages of the New York Post and the New York Daily News were dominated by sensational, competing headlines dictated directly by the parties' publicists, lawyers, and close confidants. Television programs like A Current Affair, Inside Edition, and The Joan Rivers Show acted as daily clearinghouses for these print leaks, broadcasting the escalating accusations to millions of households across the nation. The step-by-step execution of this public relations warfare was highly calculated. One side would leak details of an alleged extramarital affair or emotional neglect to a prominent gossip columnist just hours before a critical court filing, ensuring that the evening television news broadcasts would frame the impending legal maneuver around a narrative of moral outrage. The opposing side would counter by leaking financial data indicating that the other party was making unreasonable monetary demands that could jeopardize the employment of thousands of workers within the corporate empire. Imagine if a contemporary media archivist named Amanda, working in the current year 2026, were to digitize and analyze the complete television broadcast logs from February of 1990. Amanda would observe an extraordinary phenomenon. Traditional hard news anchors on major networks were dedicating significant airtime to breaking down the specific contractual clauses of the couple's 1987 postnuptial agreement. The public was treated to an unprecedented, granular analysis of how a $10 million cash payout provision, a specific housing allowance, and a confidentiality restriction operated within the context of a high-net-worth divorce. This was no longer just gossip. It was a mass media seminar on the strategic implementation of contract law within domestic relationships. The historical trends derived from this media saturation indicate that the broadcast completely revolutionized how affluent Americans, as well as middle-class professionals, approach the concept of marital property. The case study demonstrated that a postnuptial agreement was not an admission of marital failure, but rather an essential instrument of corporate governance and personal asset protection. The tactical weaponization of the media during this dispute also revealed a deeper, more cynical evolution in the public's consumption of relationship trauma. Television audiences were no longer merely passive observers offering sympathy. They were actively encouraged by talk show hosts and news commentators to choose sides, effectively acting as an unsequestered national jury. This public polarization had tangible, potential outcomes inside the courtroom. Judges, despite their mandate of judicial neutrality, were operating within an environment where every decision regarding temporary alimony, motion filings, or deposition scheduling was instantly scrutinized, criticized, and debated on evening infotainment programs. The legal teams understood that creating a sustained, negative public narrative around an opponent could inflict severe reputational damage, potentially forcing an adversary to settle on less favorable terms simply to escape the unremitting media glare. This high-profile corporate divorce war served as the ultimate proof of concept for the media industries of the era, establishing that the total dismantling of a high-society marriage could generate sustained, record-breaking television ratings and consumer engagement. It marked the moment where the boundary between corporate public relations, family law, and tabloid entertainment was permanently eradicated. The strategies refined during this historic corporate battle provided a sophisticated blueprint that would be emulated by wealthy elites, public figures, and entertainment stars for decades to come. However, as the 1980s transitioned into the final public resolutions of these massive financial disputes, the televised divorce journey began to expose an even darker, more harrowing dimension of domestic breakdown. The public, having grown accustomed to the complex division of real estate portfolios, corporate stocks, and luxury assets, was about to be forced to confront the absolute limits of legal and media ethics. The focus of daytime television programming and investigative news magazines was shifting away from the distribution of material wealth and toward the most emotionally explosive, non-liquidatable aspect of any marital dissolution: the weaponization, custody, and psychological control of the children caught in the middle of these televised battlefields. This impending shift would introduce terrifying new legal theories and media tactics that would leave the American public questioning the true human cost of converting family trauma into broadcast entertainment, setting up a dark era of custody warfare that would change the legal landscape for parents forever. This dark era of custody warfare was fundamentally accelerated by a massive systemic shift in the American judiciary's approach to determining parental rights. For the first half of the 20th century, the legal system relied heavily on the tender years doctrine, a judicial presumption that maternal custody was inherently superior for young children, particularly during their developmental years. However, by the dawn of the 1980s, family law courts across the United States rapidly replaced this traditional doctrine with a gender-neutral framework known as the best interests of the child standard. While this statutory shift aimed to create judicial equity and allow qualified fathers to seek equal parental involvement, the practical reality inside crowded family courts was a chaotic, ill-defined legal battleground. Because the new standard was highly subjective, it required judges to evaluate the psychological fitness, moral character, and lifestyle choices of both parents without rigid guidelines. This subjective vulnerability became the exact entry point for daytime television producers, who realized that child custody disputes offered the ultimate high-stakes narrative, a literal war for the possession of a child. In 1985, child psychiatrist Dr. Richard Gardner formulated the concept of parental alienation syndrome, a highly controversial theory suggesting that one parent could systematically brainwash a child to unjustifiably reject and vilify the other parent. Although this concept was met with immediate skepticism within established scientific and psychological circles, it spread through the American daytime television landscape like wildfire. Shows like The Phil Donahue Show and Geraldo devoted entire episodes to hosting Gardner alongside warring parents who claimed their children had been turned against them. For television producers, this concept was an absolute goldmine. It provided a dramatic, step-by-step vocabulary that guests could use to attack each other on air. Viewers watched in fascination as mothers were accused of psychological brainwashing, and fathers countered with allegations of maternal instability. The historical trends of this mid-1980s period demonstrate that these broadcasts acted as a direct transmission vector, carrying a highly weaponized, unvetted psychological theory out of academic journals, and placing it directly into the hands of family law litigants and their attorneys. A case study from 1986 involving a highly contested custody battle in Illinois showcased how an attorney explicitly cited a daytime talk show segment on parental alienation to successfully alter a judge's perception of a mother's behavioral patterns, illustrating the profound real-world consequences of these televised narratives. Imagine if a family law mediator named Christopher, practicing in the current year 2026, were to systematically review the digital archives of these 1980s daytime broadcasts. Christopher would immediately recognize the structural origins of the most toxic litigation strategies used in modern custody disputes. In these archival recordings, producers pioneered the exact step-by-step methods of public mudslinging that continue to plague family courts today. Television segments would feature detailed, granular instructions on how a parent could document their spouse's minor parental infractions, such as a late pickup from school, an improper meal, or a brief emotional outburst, to compile an adversarial dossier for custody evaluators. This media-driven education taught an entire generation of American parents to view their co-parenting relationship not as a cooperative partnership, but as a zero-sum game where any perceived flaw could be leveraged to restrict parental access. The potential outcomes of this systemic conditioning were devastating, resulting in a generation of children whose private familial relationships were deeply compromised by the adversarial nature of their parents' media-informed legal strategies. The stakes of this televised custody warfare reached a terrifying apex with the systemic rise of parental kidnapping during the early to mid-1980s. As no-fault laws and changing custody standards left many parents feeling alienated or disenfranchised by the judicial system, a significant number of individuals chose to bypass the legal process altogether by abducting their own children and fleeing across state lines. In response to this growing national crisis, Congress enacted the Parental Kidnapping Prevention Act of 1980, which sought to establish jurisdictional uniformity and prevent parents from shopping for favorable custody rulings in different states. However, enforcement was slow, and tracking down missing children across a vast nation before the digital age was an incredibly difficult task. Daytime television eagerly stepped into this enforcement vacuum, transforming investigative news magazines and tabloid talk shows into amateur detective agencies. Programs like Sally Jessy Raphael and The Oprah Winfrey Show regularly featured frantic parents, appealing to the national audience for information regarding their abducted children. These episodes were engineered for maximum emotional impact, utilizing split-screen technology to contrast the weeping parent in the studio with photographs of the missing child and the fugitive spouse. The operational mechanics of these missing children segments followed a highly structured production protocol. Producers would collaborate closely with emerging nonprofit organizations, such as the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, which was established in 1984. On the air, hosts would walk the audience through a step-by-step timeline of the abduction, detailing the fugitive parents' known aliases, potential employment fields, and suspected geographical locations. The show would display dedicated toll-free telephone hotlines on the screen, encouraging viewers to call in with real-time tips and sightings. While these broadcasts undoubtedly assisted in the recovery of numerous children, they also functioned as high-intensity entertainment that capitalized on the raw terror of familial destruction. The live studio audience was transformed into a vigilante jury, openly gasping at the details of the betrayal and shouting words of encouragement to the abandoned parent. This specific genre of television completely shifted the public perception of domestic disputes, moving them out of the realm of private civil matters and reframing them as high-stakes criminal manhunts that required collective public surveillance. This relentless exposure to custody warfare also forced a massive evolution within the mental health profession and the family law industry. As psychologists observed the profound trauma inflicted upon children who were forced to participate in these highly public legal and media battles, a movement toward alternative dispute resolution began to take shape. The historical trends of the late 1980s show a marked increase in the implementation of court-mandated mediation programs, designed specifically to extract children from the adversarial machinery of the traditional courtroom and the predatory gaze of television producers. Legal professionals began to warn their clients that participating in daytime talk shows or speaking to tabloid reporters could have disastrous potential outcomes during custody evaluations, as judges increasingly viewed media exposure as a sign of parental instability and a failure to protect the child's well-being. Despite these warnings, the consumer demand for raw custody drama remained insatiable, pushing television networks to find even more aggressive ways to capture the attention of the American public. The structural framework for televised divorce had now mastered the monetization of asset division, celebrity downfalls, and high-conflict custody battles. But as the decade drew to its absolute close, a new crisis was brewing on the horizon of American economic and social policy, one that would shift the media's focus from the emotional custody of children to the cold, hard mechanics of state-enforced financial accountability. The federal government was preparing to unleash a massive, nationwide crackdown on the economic aftermath of broken homes, introducing radical new surveillance systems and public shaming campaigns aimed directly at non-compliant parents. This impending shift would spark an entirely new subgenre of real-world television broadcasting, where the cameras would move out of the comfortable daytime studios and head directly into the streets alongside armed law enforcement officials, capturing the shocking real-time arrests of individuals who had attempted to evade their domestic financial obligations, a development that would permanently blur the line between family court and criminal justice in America. This criminalization of civil domestic obligations transformed local evening news broadcasts into real-time tracking operations. The passage of the Family Support Act of 1988 marked the exact historical moment when the federal government mandated that all 50 states implement aggressive, computerized systems to monitor, track, and enforce child support payments. Before this legislative overhaul, child support collection was a decentralized, largely inefficient process handled by backlogged local courts. If a non-custodial parent moved across state lines or changed employers, the collection process frequently stalled, leaving custodial parents with few legal recourses. The 1988 Act fundamentally disrupted this dynamic by creating the State Parent Locator Service, a centralized network that utilized primitive mainframe computer databases to cross-reference Social Security numbers, tax returns, employment records, and motor vehicle registrations. This newly established digital surveillance net provided local television news directors with an endless supply of dramatic content. Stations across the United States began producing recurring weekly segments with titles like Deadbeat Dad Patrol or Catching the Tax Evaders. The production formula for these segments was highly standardized and optimized for maximum viewer retention. News anchors would open the broadcast with a sobering statistic regarding the millions of dollars in unpaid child support within their local municipality, framing the issue not merely as a private family matter, but as a direct financial drain on local taxpayers who funded state welfare programs. The broadcast would then cut directly to pre-recorded, handheld camera footage of local sheriff deputies or county constables executing arrest warrants for civil contempt of court. To understand the psychological and social impact of this phenomenon, imagine a resident named Michael living in Atlanta, Georgia, in the year 1989. Michael, a skilled construction worker, had recently gone through a bitter divorce and subsequently lost his job during a regional economic downturn. Falling behind on his court-ordered child support payments by several months, Michael was automatically flagged by the state's new computerized monitoring system. One Tuesday morning, as Michael walked out of a local hardware store, he was suddenly surrounded by 3 armed law enforcement officers. Immediately behind the officers was a local television station camera crew, their high-intensity halogen lights illuminating the scene for the evening news. Michael was forced against the side of his truck, handcuffed, and read his rights while the reporter thrust a microphone into his face, demanding to know why he refused to support his children. When this segment aired on the 6 o'clock news, Michael's entire community witnessed his public humiliation. The potential outcomes of this hypervisible enforcement strategy were complex and highly polarizing. For the television station, the segment was an unqualified success, generating high ratings and positioning the network as a civic crusader protecting vulnerable children. For the state enforcement agencies, the televised arrest served as a powerful deterrent, signaling to other non-compliant parents that evasion would result in immediate public exposure. However, for Michael and his family, the real-world consequences were catastrophic. The public exposure made it virtually impossible for him to secure new employment in his field, as local contractors refused to hire an individual branded as a criminal on national television. Furthermore, the psychological trauma inflicted upon his children, who watched their father's arrest broadcast to their schoolmates, created a deep, permanent rift within the family dynamic that no amount of financial collection could repair. If a social policy researcher named Sarah in the current year 2026 were to analyze the historical trends initiated by these 1980s broadcasts, she would identify a direct evolutionary path leading to modern digital public shaming and the criminalization of poverty. The 1980s television industry established the precedent that individuals who failed to meet the financial obligations of a divorce decree were stripped of their right to privacy. This led directly to state governments publishing deadbeat dad posters, creating early internet databases of non-compliant parents, and utilizing public transit billboards to shame individuals into compliance. The television screen became an extension of the punitive judicial apparatus, demonstrating that the media was no longer just reporting on the divorce journey. It was actively participating in the enforcement of its economic consequences. Look at another documented case study from 1988 in Ohio, where a county prosecutor coordinated a massive, pre-dawn sweep of child support evaders specifically timed to coincide with the November television sweeps period. The prosecutor invited multiple local news affiliates to participate in the raid, assigning camera crews to different arrest teams. Over the course of 48 hours, dozens of individuals were pulled from their beds in their pajamas and marched past television cameras. The resulting broadcasts were edited with dramatic music and sensational narration, transforming a bureaucratic administrative crisis into an action-packed crime drama. This case study highlights how the lines between law enforcement, judicial administration, and commercial entertainment became completely indistinguishable. The paradox of these televised enforcement campaigns lay in their structural failure to address the underlying economic realities of the late 1980s. While the media presented every non-compliant parent as a wealthy, malicious evader hiding assets in secret bank accounts, historical trends and economic data revealed that the vast majority of individuals who fell behind on child support were low-income workers struggling with structural unemployment, underemployment, or a lack of access to legal representation to modify their support orders. Television, by its very nature, preferred the simplistic narrative of good versus evil over the complex realities of socioeconomic distress. The broadcast systematically ignored the systemic flaws of a family court system that frequently set support obligations based on imputed income rather than actual earnings, leaving vulnerable individuals trapped in an inescapable cycle of debt and impending incarceration. As this decade of televised trauma, asset liquidation, custody battles, and public shaming campaigns drew to a close, the American legal and media establishments realized that they had created an absolute monster of public consumption. The insatiable appetite of the viewing audience had been thoroughly tested and proven. The industry had successfully commercialized the destruction of the ordinary family, the corporate assets of the ultra-rich, and the freedom of the economically disadvantaged. There was only one final ultimate boundary left for the televised divorce journey to cross. The media was about to move past the afternoon talk shows, past the local news ride-alongs, and past the highly edited tabloid magazines. The legal system was preparing to open the floodgates to a revolutionary new programming format that would broadcast entire, unedited, high-stakes matrimonial and domestic trials live on national television 24 hours a day, a development that would transform actual courtroom judges into international celebrities and turn a horrific domestic tragedy into the most watched television event in human history, leaving the nation to witness a dark convergence of marital collapse and jurisprudence that would change the American cultural landscape forever. This technical integration of television and the judiciary required a fundamental rewriting of state-level legal statutes across the United States. For decades, the American Bar Association's Canon 35 had strictly prohibited the use of cameras and microphones inside federal and state courtrooms, viewing the presence of recording equipment as an inherent threat to the decorum, safety, and psychological integrity of legal proceedings. However, throughout the late 1970s and early 1980s, media conglomerates launched a coordinated step-by-step lobbying campaign to challenge these restrictions. The breakthrough arrived via landmark judicial experiments, most notably the 1981 United States Supreme Court ruling in Chandler v. Florida, which determined that a state could constitutionally permit electronic media coverage of trials without violating a defendant's right to a fair trial. This constitutional green light prompted states like New York and California to implement temporary, experimental programs allowing television cameras into trial courts. Concurrently, the Federal Communications Commission underwent a massive wave of deregulation under the Reagan administration, culminating in the historic 1987 repeal of the Fairness Doctrine. This regulatory shift eliminated the requirement for broadcasters to present balanced, contrasting viewpoints on controversial issues of public importance. The potential outcomes of this dual deregulation were profound. Television station owners were suddenly emancipated from both legal restrictions inside courtrooms and regulatory restrictions on the airwaves. They realized that unedited, high-conflict legal proceedings represented the ultimate low-cost, high-yield programming model. Production companies began laying the corporate and technological foundations for specialized cable networks, most notably the project envisioned by legal journalist Stephen Brill, which would eventually launch as Court TV. The strategic objective was to transition away from the highly edited, sensationalized summaries of evening news broadcasts, and instead offer the American public continuous gavel-to-gavel coverage of real human lives being dismantled by the legal system. To see how this legal and media convergence operated at the absolute extreme of domestic conflict, one must examine the extraordinary case study of Dan and Betty Broderick in San Diego, California, a legal war that unfolded throughout the mid to late 1980s. Dan Broderick was a highly prominent, wealthy medical malpractice attorney and the former president of the San Diego Bar Association, while Betty Broderick was a devoted housewife who had spent the early years of their marriage supporting him through both medical school and Harvard Law School. When the marriage collapsed in 1985, due to Dan's relationship with his young legal assistant, Linda Kolkina, the resulting divorce proceedings became a legendary example of what family law professionals categorize as a high-conflict domestic dissolution. Because Dan possessed an intimate, expert knowledge of the California judicial system and maintained deep professional relationships with local family court judges, he was able to navigate the state's no-fault divorce laws with devastating tactical precision. The step-by-step legal strategies deployed during this 5-year marital war provided a comprehensive masterclass in the weaponization of family law. Dan systematically implemented a complex framework of financial sanctions and legal maneuvers, utilizing advanced concepts like Epstein credits and What's charges to financially penalize Betty for her emotional and erratic behavior. Epstein credits allowed a paying spouse to claim reimbursement for separate property funds used to pay community debts after the date of separation, while What's charges permitted the community estate to charge a spouse for the exclusive use of a community asset, such as the family residence, during the pendency of the divorce. By aggressively leveraging these technical statutes, Dan was able to drastically reduce Betty's temporary support allocations, liquidate shared assets without her consent, and secure sole temporary custody of their 4 children. Betty, lacking formal legal training and feeling completely alienated by an institutional system that appeared to validate her ex-husband's every move, experienced a profound psychological unraveling. Imagine if a contemporary family law specialist named Marcus, practicing in the current year 2026, were to review the archived multimedia records and court transcripts of the Broderick litigation. Marcus would observe that this historical case study perfectly illustrates the dangerous systemic failure of the 1980s legal apparatus to accommodate the profound psychological trauma of marital rejection. The family court treated this highly volatile, emotionally explosive domestic crisis as a simple bureaucratic math problem, focusing exclusively on the cold distribution of real estate portfolios, corporate holdings, and support equations. The court-ordered mediation sessions and temporary hearings completely ignored the underlying patterns of coercive control and systemic legal abuse, leaving Betty trapped in an inescapable state of legal limbo. The continuous local television coverage of the escalating dispute further exacerbated the tension, as reporters detailed Betty's increasingly desperate outbursts, including driving her car into Dan's front door, leaving hundreds of profane messages on his answering machine. The absolute breaking point occurred in September of 1989, when Dan successfully secured a bifurcated divorce decree. This specific legal procedure allowed the court to immediately dissolve the marital status of the parties, freeing Dan to legally marry Linda Kolkina, while deferring the highly contentious issues of final asset division and permanent custody to a future, indefinite trial date. This structural separation of status from property completely stripped Betty of her identity and her perceived security, while leaving her legal liabilities fully intact. The potential outcomes of this prolonged institutional pressure turned fatal on November 5, 1989, when Betty entered Dan's home using a stolen key and fatally shot both Dan and his new wife in their bed. The subsequent criminal trials, which commenced in 1990 and were broadcast with extensive, gavel-to-gavel coverage, became a national television sensation that permanently altered the American cultural landscape. The television screen became a national forum for an intense, highly polarized debate regarding the psychological boundaries of marital desperation, the concept of temporary insanity, and the inherent biases of the family court system. Viewers did not merely watch the trial as a criminal proceeding. They viewed it as the tragic, logical culmination of the 1980s televised divorce journey. The defense argued that Betty had been driven to a state of psychological homicide by years of calculated, institutional legal abuse, while the prosecution framed her as a narcissistic, vindictive materialist who refused to accept the reality of a legally valid marital dissolution. This historic case study demonstrated to the television industry that the complete, violent destruction of a family could command a dominant share of the American public's attention for months on end. The media had successfully proven that the journey of a marriage, from the idealized fairy tale weddings of the early 1980s to the bloody televised courtroom trials of the decade's end, was the most lucrative narrative structure in modern broadcasting history. The strategies, legal concepts, and public relations tactics refined during this dark era established the definitive structural blueprint for the contemporary true crime industry and the highly voyeuristic reality television programs that dominate current digital platforms in the year 2026. Yet, as the nation reeled from the shocking revelations of the Broderick trials, the ultimate convergence of television high society marriage, and the American criminal justice system was preparing to shift its focus toward an even more influential, internationally recognized figure, setting up a media event so massive it would completely dwarf everything that came before it, forcing the public to question the very fabric of justice, race, and celebrity in the United States. This monumental intersection found its roots in the profound technological and statutory transformations that occurred between 1988 and 1989, a period that laid the exact operational infrastructure for the modern media-saturated legal environment. To understand how the American public was conditioned to consume the absolute collapse of high society marriages, one must examine the systematic rewriting of state-level public records acts during the late 1980s. Prior to this period, emergency dispatch audio recordings, police log entries, and preliminary investigative reports were strictly guarded within local municipal police departments, viewed as confidential administrative data necessary for active law enforcement operations. However, a series of aggressive legal challenges mounted by major media coalitions successfully reclassified these audio recordings as public records accessible under state freedom of information statutes. The immediate consequence of this statutory reclassification was a fundamental re-engineering of the daily workflow within syndicated television newsrooms. Production assistants at programs like Hard Copy, Inside Edition, and A Current Affair were no longer merely waiting for formal press releases from courthouse public information officers. Instead, they established a daily, step-by-step protocol of scanning emergency room admission records, pulling police dispatch logs from affluent residential sectors, and filing immediate public records requests for any audio tapes involving recognizable public figures, corporate executives, or entertainment elites. This operational shift meant that the private, raw, and often terrifying moments of domestic discord were captured on magnetic tape and made available for broadcast long before a formal divorce petition was ever drafted or filed in a court of law. Imagine if a contemporary media scholar named David, analyzing archival broadcast history in the current year 2026, were to review the late 1980s audio transmission logs of major television markets. David would instantly recognize that the media was utilizing these audio assets to construct a highly sophisticated, predictive entertainment loop. Television producers discovered that broadcasting a leaked 911 call from a celebrity estate achieved unprecedented viewer retention rates. The audio was treated as a real-time trailer for an impending legal drama. Audiences were invited to listen to the breathy, panicked voices of spouses trapped in volatile domestic situations, while on-screen graphics broke down the estimated value of the real estate where the incident occurred. This strategic deployment of audio evidence fundamentally altered the timeline of public consumption. A marital breakdown was no longer a retrospective news story announced via a sterile legal decree. It was a live, evolving narrative that the public could track step by step through the audio remnants of domestic collapse. This media evolution occurred simultaneously with a critical transformation within the civil justice system: the widespread judicial abolition of interspousal tort immunity. For generations, the common law doctrine of interspousal immunity prevented husbands and wives from bringing civil tort actions against one another for personal injuries, based on the legal fiction that a married couple constituted a single legal entity. Throughout the 1980s, state Supreme Courts systematically dismantled this doctrine, recognizing that it served to shield abusive or financially deceptive behavior from accountability. The elimination of this immunity meant that a family law attorney representing a client in a divorce proceeding could simultaneously file a civil tort claim for assault, battery, intentional infliction of emotional distress, or marital fraud. The historical trends of this late 1980s transition reveal that these dual filings completely revolutionized the financial landscape of matrimonial litigation. A divorce action was no longer confined to the strict statutory guidelines of equitable asset distribution or alimony calculators. By attaching a civil tort claim to the divorce petition, an aggrieved spouse could seek unlimited compensatory and punitive damages before a civil jury. Television legal analysts dedicated extensive programming segments to breaking down the step-by-step mechanics of this new litigation strategy. Viewers learned how a history of domestic discord could be quantified into a specific monetary demand, transforming an emotional trauma into a highly complex financial calculation. Case studies from this era demonstrate that the threat of a public jury trial regarding personal conduct became the ultimate point of leverage in high-net-worth settlement negotiations, forcing affluent individuals to make massive financial concessions simply to prevent their private behavior from being paraded before a television audience. The operational reality of these high-stakes corporate and celebrity divorces required a new breed of legal professional: the media-savvy family law attorney who functioned simultaneously as a senior litigator and a public relations strategist. These professionals understood that the potential outcomes of a multi-million-dollar asset dispute were heavily influenced by the narrative established in the court of public opinion. They developed a highly calculated methodology for interacting with broadcast journalists. Legal teams would draft comprehensive, explicitly detailed motion filings filled with explosive allegations regarding an opponent's financial hidden assets, substance use, or parental negligence. These documents were intentionally filed with the court clerk precisely 45 minutes before the close of business on a Friday afternoon. This timing was strategically selected to ensure that the opposing legal team would be unable to formulate a formal written counterresponse before the weekend, allowing syndicated infotainment programs to broadcast the uncontradicted allegations throughout the prime Saturday and Sunday viewing slots. This integration of public relations and family law created an environment where the boundary between actual jurisprudence and commercial entertainment was completely dissolved. The television screen functioned as an alternative tribunal, where reputations were systematically dismantled for commercial profit. The historical trends of the late 1980s established that this hypervisible commodification of relationship failure had a profound, distorting effect on the general public's perception of the legal system. Average citizens, observing the aggressive, media-driven tactics of the ultra-wealthy, began to view the family court apparatus as an inherently hostile adversarial arena where truth was secondary to narrative manipulation and financial dominance. As the decade drew to its absolute close, this continuous exposure to leaked audio evidence, high-stakes civil tort claims, and synchronized public relations campaigns had fully prepared the American public for a total immersion into the mechanics of domestic tragedy. The technical infrastructure was finalized, the regulatory barriers were eliminated, and the consumer appetite for unvarnished domestic warfare was at an all-time high. The media industry had mastered the art of transforming the breakdown of the traditional family into a highly predictable, immensely profitable commercial product. Yet, as the nation stood on the precipice of a new decade, the ultimate evolution of this televised journey was about to manifest in an event so structurally complex, culturally explosive, and legally unprecedented that it would completely dwarf the localized scandals of the 1980s. The world was about to witness a historic convergence where a long-documented history of marital distress, public audio leaks, and high society isolation would culminate in a double homicide investigation involving an international sports icon, setting off an unedited, multi-year media circus that would force the United States to confront the deep, unresolved intersections of race, celebrity, wealth, and the true limits of constitutional justice, an impending cultural shockwave that would permanently transform the media landscape and leave the entire world utterly transfixed by the darkest realities of the American domestic dream. This cultural shockwave did not emerge in isolation. It was the direct consequence of a highly calculated, technological infrastructure built throughout the late 1980s that systematically converted domestic terror into a broadcast commodity. The definitive catalyst for this transition occurred on New Year's Day in 1989, within the affluent enclave of Brentwood, California, when police responded to a frantic 911 call at the residence of international sports icon O.J. Simpson and his wife, Nicole Brown Simpson. They encountered a scene of severe domestic distress. While the immediate legal consequence was a single charge of spousal abuse to which the athlete pleaded no contest, the long-term media consequence was the creation of a terrifying new template for tabloid journalism. The newly deregulated television networks, equipped with the statutory right to acquire emergency recordings under revised public records laws, realized that the private suffering of high society marriages could be stripped of all confidentiality and transformed into a multi-week broadcasting event. The media apparatus that devoured this incident was anchored by a new triumvirate of syndicated tabloid programs that redefined television economics between 1988 and 1990. Fox's A Current Affair, Paramount's Hard Copy, and King World's Inside Edition. These programs operated outside the traditional journalistic standards of network news divisions, pioneering a practice known as checkbook journalism. For the first time in media history, production companies routinely paid tens of thousands of dollars to secure exclusive access to leaked audio tapes, private family photographs, medical records, and interviews with household staff, security guards, or neighbors who had witnessed domestic altercations. This aggressive monetization created a powerful financial incentive for individuals surrounding a failing high-profile marriage to betray confidential family dynamics. The family law landscape shifted overnight. Attorneys representing wealthy clients were suddenly forced to implement a mandatory step-by-step protocol requiring all domestic employees, nannies, and private contractors to sign comprehensive non-disclosure agreements as standard employment conditions, an operational trend that began precisely during this late 1980s window to mitigate the predatory tactics of syndicated television crews. Concurrently, the American legal framework was undergoing a profound administrative transformation regarding the intersection of criminal domestic conduct and civil marital dissolution. Throughout the early and mid-1980s, family court judges routinely treated allegations of domestic abuse as separate, isolated incidents that had minimal bearing on the equitable distribution of property or the calculation of spousal support, frequently dismissing these volatile dynamics as situational friction inherent to marital breakdown. However, the publication of the 1984 Minneapolis Domestic Violence Experiment, which demonstrated that immediate police arrest was the most effective deterrent against recurring domestic abuse, catalyzed a massive nationwide legislative shift. By 1989, states across the nation were systematically implementing mandatory arrest laws and revising their family codes to dictate that a documented history of domestic violence created a rebuttable presumption against awarding sole or joint custody to an abusive parent. This statutory alignment meant that a criminal police record or a leaked 911 audio tape was no longer merely a matter of personal shame. It became a decisive radioactive asset within the context of a civil divorce proceeding, capable of instantly dismantling an opponent's legal standing, financial claims, and parental rights. Imagine if a domestic relations researcher named Jason, working in the current year 2026, were to systematically analyze the digitized archival deposition tapes from this transitional period at the close of the 1980s. Jason would observe a distinct change in the strategic behavior of family law litigators. In these recorded proceedings, attorneys are seen meticulously introducing leaked audio recordings and television broadcast transcripts directly into evidence during civil asset negotiations. The step-by-step strategy was clear. By demonstrating that an opponent's abusive or volatile conduct was already a matter of public record via syndicated television, the moving party could argue that the marital estate had suffered severe financial dissipation due to the reputational damage inflicted on the family's corporate interests or professional standing. Jason would recognize that the hyper-adversarial litigation models of the modern digital age were entirely blueprint during this exact window, where the line between a criminal domestic incident and a civil property dispute was permanently erased by the media's insatiable demand for high-retention content. The broader potential outcomes of this media saturation stretched far beyond the boardrooms of the wealthy, fundamentally altering how the general public conceptualized relationship health and personal safety. Through the daily broadcasting of these extreme case studies, the American audience received a raw education in the psychological theories surrounding domestic dysfunction, most notably the cycle of violence formulated by Dr. Lenore Walker. Television talk shows and investigative segments popularized concepts such as the honeymoon phase, the tension-building phase, and the acute battering incident, integrating complex psychological terminology into the everyday vocabulary of ordinary citizens. Viewers sitting in their living rooms were forced to confront the harsh reality that structural wealth, celebrity status, and material luxury offered zero protection against systemic emotional and physical isolation. This widespread public awareness had historical trends of increasing the volume of domestic violence hotlines and crisis center admissions across the United States, as the demystification of these private tragedies empowered individuals to recognize dangerous behavioral patterns within their own domestic environments and seek immediate legal intervention. Yet, as the decade of the 1980s officially concluded, the television industry's mastery over the monetization of relationship trauma had reached a point of absolute saturation. The audience had been thoroughly conditioned to consume the step-by-step dismantling of the ordinary middle-class family, the high-stakes corporate warfare of billionaire real estate tycoons, the psychological manipulation of custody battles, and the terrifying realities of domestic abuse captured on public audio records. The media had successfully transformed the private civil contract of marriage into the most dominant, profitable narrative engine in the history of global broadcasting. Every boundary of privacy had been crossed, every legal statute had been leveraged for viewer retention, and every structural vulnerability of the human heart had been commodified for advertising revenue. The stage was now completely set for the final, ultimate phase of this historical masterclass, where all of these disparate legal, media, and cultural elements would synthesize into a permanent legacy that defines how we view relationships, law, and media in the modern era, leading us to the definitive conclusion of the televised divorce journey, where we will examine the lasting structural impact of this transformative decade on modern relationship psychology, the contemporary legal system of the year 2026, and the ultimate price a society pays when it converts its most intimate domestic promises into a permanent, unremitting public spectacle. The architectural blueprint created during this tumultuous decade did not merely fade into media history. It became the structural foundation for the entire modern ecosystem of relationship consumption, legal strategy, and interpersonal communication that we observe today. When we evaluate the long-term historical trends that transitioned from the analog broadcast towers of the 1980s to the hyper-connected digital networks of the year 2026, the direct evolutionary lineage is undeniable. The fundamental democratization of marital discord that began on daytime talk shows has culminated in a culture where the boundaries between public performance and private intimacy have been completely erased. The 1980s taught the American public how to watch divorce. The subsequent decades taught them how to replicate that visibility within their own lives using the digital tools of the 21st century. To fully grasp the magnitude of this permanent systemic legacy, one must examine the contemporary family law apparatus of 2026 through the lens of those foundational 1980s case studies. The statutory innovations that once seemed revolutionary and disruptive, such as the introduction of equitable distribution guidelines, automated federal child support tracking systems, and the utilization of joint custody evaluations based on the highly subjective best interests of the child standard, are now the standard operating protocols of every family court in the United States. The chaotic legal experiments of the 1980s have been refined into highly streamlined, bureaucratic, and algorithmic systems. Today, forensic accounting relies on sophisticated software to trace hidden assets across global financial networks, a technological evolution that was direct line from the early efforts of 1980s accountants, attempting to value complex corporate portfolios and celebrity brands under newly enacted state property laws. Imagine a contemporary scenario unfolding in the current year 2026. A corporate professional named Matthew, living in Charlotte, North Carolina, finds himself navigating the initial stages of a complex marital dissolution. Matthew does not consult local television schedules to understand his legal options, nor does he audition to voice his grievances on a daytime talk show. Instead, his entire divorce journey is mediated, tracked, and managed through specialized digital applications, automated legal platforms, and encrypted communication portals designed specifically for co-parenting compliance. When Matthew logs into a state-mandated parenting application to document his drop-off times, exchange receipts, and communication logs with his estranged spouse, he is utilizing an administrative infrastructure that was forged in the fires of the 1980s custody wars. The meticulous step-by-step documentation methods that talk show hosts once recommended to studio audiences have been formalized into legally binding digital records, where every text message, calendar alteration, and financial transfer is automatically archived for judicial review. Furthermore, Matthew's strategic management of his personal and professional narrative across social media platforms during the litigation process mirrors the exact public relations methodologies developed by the high society legal teams of the late 1980s. He understands that a single uncoordinated public statement, an emotionally volatile digital update, or a perceived display of financial extravagance can have immediate, negative potential outcomes within the context of his custody evaluation or asset distribution hearings. The calculated manipulation of public perception that Donald and Ivana Trump executed through the print tabloids and syndicated news magazines of 1990 has been fully decentralized and placed into the hands of ordinary citizens. Every individual navigating a modern relationship breakdown now functions as their own public relations manager, operating with a hyper-awareness of how their private behavior can be weaponized against them within an adversarial legal environment. This hypervisibility has also permanently altered the psychological landscape of modern American relationships. The historical trends tracking the widespread adoption of prenuptial and postnuptial agreements among middle-class professionals in 2026 demonstrate that the 1980s completely succeeded in reframing the marital contract from a permanent romantic covenant into a sophisticated instrument of personal risk management. The cultural narrative of the fairy tale wedding, which began the decade with such global prominence, was systematically dismantled by 10 years of unremitting television exposure to asset liquidation and emotional fallout. Consequently, contemporary generations approach the institution of marriage with a distinct, inherited pragmatism. They understand that a marriage contract is, from a statutory perspective, an economic partnership that carries profound long-term liabilities, and they utilize defensive legal planning not as an admission of impending failure, but as an essential element of modern financial literacy. The media industry itself has experienced an equally profound structural evolution rooted entirely in the programming innovations of the 1980s. The daytime talk show segments that capitalized on the raw, unscripted trauma of real families laid the exact operational groundwork for the multi-billion-dollar reality television syndicates, true crime networks, and personal digital vlogging empires that dominate consumer attention today. The 1980s proved to network executives that human suffering, interpersonal conflict, and the systematic dismantling of familial structures represented an inexhaustible, highly profitable source of viewer engagement. This realization permanently shifted the economics of broadcasting away from costly scripted dramas toward low-overhead, high-retention reality formats. The contemporary viewer in 2026 who consumes hours of content dedicated to public breakups, courtroom arbitrations, and true crime deep dives is participating in a cultural ritual that was systematically engineered and optimized for commercial monetization 4 decades ago. The ultimate price a society pays for converting its most intimate domestic promises into a permanent public spectacle is a profound collective erosion of interpersonal trust. The 1980s televised divorce journey acted as a massive cultural mirror, forcing America to confront the systemic flaws, economic vulnerabilities, and psychological complexities hidden beneath the idealized surface of the traditional family unit. While this exposure successfully stripped away decades of debilitating social stigma and provided vital legal education to millions of vulnerable individuals, it simultaneously institutionalized an adversarial model of human partnership that continues to influence social dynamics today. We have become a society that is hyper-educated in the mechanics of separation, hyper-vigilant against the threat of emotional and financial betrayal, and hyper-proficient in the deployment of legal and media strategies designed to maximize personal advantage during domestic collapse. As we conclude this comprehensive look back at the historical forces, legal transformations, and media strategies that defined the televised divorce journey of the 1980s, we are left to confront the enduring legacy of this transformative era on the future of human connection. The historical data has revealed how we arrived at this current landscape of digitized relationships and algorithmic family courts, but it also raises an even more profound, unsettling question about where these systemic trends are accelerating as we look beyond the horizon of the current year. The structural dismantling of the traditional marriage contract in the 20th century has set the stage for an entirely new, unprecedented evolutionary shift in how future generations will define family, property, and commitment in an increasingly fragmented digital world. What happens when the very concept of a legally binding domestic union undergoes its next radical mutation? And how will the next generation of media technologies transform the future of human intimacy into something completely unrecognizable? The answers to these questions are already beginning to surface within the emerging legal battles of the new decade, setting up a profound cultural shift that will challenge everything we think we know about love, law, and survival on the digital frontier.